Hey y'all, and welcome back to Brandi Beauty TV. Today we are going to be doing my client Anika's silk press. And while we do that, we are also going to be having a discussion about everything you should know about your hair texture. So that means if your hair is straight, wavy, curly, kinky, anything in between, it does not matter. If you are watching this video, I'm going to break down everything you need to know about hair texture. So in order to understand your hair texture, we first need to understand what hair is made of and also the composition. So hair consists of a chain of proteins called keratin, and it also consists of 3 different layers. The first layer is going to be your hair cuticle. That is what's going to be on the outside. That's the outermost layer. That pretty much, it kind of looks like scales on a fish if you look at it under a microscope. And also if you feel it, it can also feel scaly as well. And it gives it its strength. It protects the bonds on the inside from stress and harmful substances. And it's basically like a shield. The next layer is going to be the cortex. And that's where you're going to find where your melanin is, your pigment resides there, your undertones. Sometimes if you look in the sun and say, for example, like you put like a black dye on your hair or any other color, or if you just have your natural color and you look at it in the sun, sometimes it'll appear red or sometimes yellow. Well, that is showing from the cortex of the hair. And so that's where all your undertones are going to show that reside in your hair color. And so also what you'll find in your cortex is the moisture, the strength, and your texture. Okay, and the last layer is going to be the medulla. And that is the softest and most fragile part of the 3 layers. And large amounts of your DNA is stored here. And if you look under a microscope, depending on how thick, or I should say how fine or coarse your strands are, sometimes the medulla doesn't even appear to be present. It can even appear to be absent. But that's just how delicate it is. And so all those 3 layers combined, the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla, is what makes up a hair strand. Now, within those 3 layers, what holds all of them together are the amino acids. And there are 3 different kinds of amino acids. You have one chemical bond, which is scientifically known as the disulfide bond. And there are 2 physical bonds, which are weaker, which is the hydrogen bond and the salt bond. Now, the disulfide bond is the strongest bond, and that pretty much gives your hair the strength that it has. So once you break your disulfide bonds, your hair can easily get weaker, of course. And you also have to sometimes do a little bit more to maintain the integrity of the hair. Now, can you have healthy hair with breaking disulfide bonds? Absolutely. You absolutely can. But your regimens are probably going to look a little bit different. And things like relaxers, color, perms, anything like that that's going to change, affect those disulfide bonds, is going to essentially break them. And once a disulfide bond is broken, you cannot repair it. Once it's broken forever. So next we have our physical side bonds, which are the hydrogen bond and the salt bond. And these 2 bonds are much weaker in comparison to the disulfide bond. The disulfide bond can only be broken by chemicals. However, the hydrogen and salt bond, those are broken by heat and water. Now, by looking at Anika's hair, you can see that some of her hair was curly and some of it was a little bit straighter. Well, that was because we have broken some of her disulfide bonds, and we have also broken her salt bonds as well, because Anika does not have a relaxer. However, she does have color, and color can change your curl pattern or your texture slightly. Now, it doesn't make it unhealthy per se. It can make it unhealthy if it's done incorrectly, but change doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. It just means that it has changed. And you can change the texture of your hair. Now, some people don't like that. They feel like if it's not curly, it's not healthy. That's not true. If it's not curly, that just means that it's not curly. Realistically, if you think about it, that's like saying somebody with straight hair has unhealthy hair. It's not that their hair is unhealthy, it's just straight. You know what I mean? So if the health and integrity is still there, then that's all that matters. And so the hydrogen and the salt bonds, those are the physical side bonds. And the hydrogen bond can be broken by water and water alone. So if you get in the sink or you decide to shampoo your hair, if it's straight when it's dry, you have changed that bond by putting water on it. And so now it's probably going to be curly. The texture is going to change. And also the pH will probably change too. And then also, if you use too much heat on your hair, that will change your salt bond. And if your hair is used to being curly and whatnot, putting excessive heat on it will eventually make it straight. And so if you see that happening, that means you have definitely broken a salt bond. So I know you're probably wondering, what the heck does any of that have to do with your texture? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm getting ready to tell you. So the keratin and bonds in your hair determine its texture and its shape. And it gives each hair around 1/3 of its overall strength. Okay. In addition to that, the shape of each hair is determined by the amount of strong disulfide bonds that it contains, as well as how those bonds are distributed. So if the bonds, if those disulfide bonds are more, aligned, they're more neater, they're more evenly distributed, then your hair texture will be straighter. And they also will have, of course, more disulfide bonds if your hair is straighter as well. However, if your hair is curlier, or I should say the more curlier your texture is, that means the more unevenly distributed your disulfide bonds will be, and they'll also be more clustered. And so essentially your disulfide bonds is what's going to create your curl pattern. The more tighter and jam-packed they are, the straighter your texture will be. And if they're clustered or a little bit more unevenly distributed, then you'll have curlier hair. So essentially, your disulfide bonds, which is your chemical bond, is what's going to determine how curly or straight your hair texture is, or your curl pattern. And that also is going to affect your porosity, which is another lesson, but I'll touch on it a little bit because it does have something to do with your overall texture. If your disulfide bonds are closer together, then essentially your porosity is going to be a little bit lower. If your disulfide bonds are scattered, and this means if your hair is a little bit more on the kinkier or really curly side, then that means that you'll more than likely have a higher porosity. Now, does porosity mean that your hair is unhealthy? Not in all cases, it does not. We normally, when we're discussing those kind of things, we normally have to base it off of the starting point, not just, something that we've just come to find. We always have to trace it back to, where did your hair begin? And depending on how far away it has gotten from its original and natural state, then that's normally how we can kind of determine how damaged it is or whatnot. So porosity does not mean that your hair is unhealthy. It's just your porosity. It's just your hair. And all hair is beautiful. All hair is good. It's just a matter of learning and understanding your hair type. Some other little gems that affect your hair texture are your density and the thickness of your strands. If you have a lot of hair and it's jam-packed, that's going to affect how your hair takes the product and also how thick your strands are. So people with finer hair, their strands are going to be traditionally thinner. That doesn't mean that they're weak. That just means that they are thinner. And people that have coarser hair, their strands are traditionally a little bit thicker. It doesn't mean that they're stronger or weaker. It's just that their strands are thicker, and you have to be mindful of the kind of products you use as well. So, for example, if you take somebody that has really kinky hair, but it's fine, but it's also thick in density, well, their hair might appear to be able to take a whole lot of product off first glance, but it really may not, because of their strands being so fine. And being that their strands are fine, that means that it doesn't take a whole lot for product to enter into that cortex layer or to pass through that cuticle. So essentially, texture cannot be classified by 4C, 4B, 3A, 3B, 3C. Those strictly just define or kind of group together your curl pattern. Texture embodies so much more. So when you go inside of a store and you're looking for hair products, you know, the speech they give you about what's your texture, is it 4C? That you're not going to get anything close to what you're trying to get to. There's so many things that have to be considered before you can actually label what your texture is and before you can find good products. So like I always suggest, go to a skilled professional, get your hair assessed, get an analysis of your hair, and they should be able to point you in the direction of a good regimen and also the right products. So y'all, basically what I want you to get out of today's video is really understanding that texture is just what that is texture. And although we kind of live in a world, I feel like now, where we are, becoming a little bit more educated, there's also so much misinformation going around too. And I feel like as a professional and also as someone who just loves hair and hair care, that, people that share the same love that I do for hair, it's our responsibility to kind of shed light on, on things that a lot of people, have questions about nowadays. But I will say that I am glad that we are starting to get the attention that we are getting right now, because once upon a time, no one cared about textured hair. And it was also viewed as bad, growing up. Our grandmothers, aunts, mothers would sometimes shun us for having kinky hair or really curly hair or really, really thick hair, because they didn't understand it. And of course, that goes back, to time. We weren't really raised in a society that taught us to love our hair. It was viewed as something that was just so different or strange. And it's not. It's unique. It's very unique, African American hair textures range from straight all the way to curly, and curly hair textures, that's one of the only textures, I would say not one of the, it is the only texture of hair that grows up towards the sun. All other textures grow down. People with curly hair, your hair is magnificent. It's wonderful. Our hair is magical. It can get straight, silky straight. You can manipulate it a lot. You can do various hairstyles with it. You can color it. You can relax it and wear a pixie cut. You could wear a natural and a big fro. It's so many different options that come with having curly hair. And so that's really my whole premise for doing what I do. I just want people to learn to love their hair and understand that it may be different than your daughter. Your hair may be different than your mother. Your hair may be different than your friend. But different doesn't mean bad. It just means different. I like to even sometimes compare hair texture to fabrics. You might have silk or satin or cotton, polyester, all different kinds of fabrics. That doesn't mean that one is worse than the other. It just means that they are used and they can do different things. For example, you wouldn't want to go to sleep with a cotton pillow because it's a little bit more aggressive and it can eat at your hair. However, you might want to make a coat out of some cotton. That makes sense, you know? So I like to compare hair to different fabrics, because just as many fabrics can do different things, your hair can do many different things as well. And it's all about finding out what to use on your hair, just as you would use different things on different fabrics. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching Anika get her hair silk pressed. She has such beautiful hair. I love doing her hair. And I hope y'all were able to understand the science kind of behind your hair. And you just understand that, you know, hair is hair. It's all good. There's no such thing as bad hair. The only thing that's bad hair is unhealthy hair. So get down in the comment section if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And I will see y'all in my next video. Say bye, Anika.